My name is Poon, and I will be presenting the creation and use of an OER lab manual for an introductory biology course. Very briefly, I'm going to give you the demographics of the State University of New York at Old Westbury, or SUNY Old Westbury for short, in comparison to the SUNY-wide system. As you can see, the orange bars are our campus, the blue bars are all of SUNY, and if you notice here, the majority of our students are actually made up of minorities. More than 50% of our student demographics are underrepresented minorities, and not shown here, but a majority of our students do receive some form of financial aid, and many are actually first to college. So our student population is actually very unique. So moving on to the lab manual, we, in the BS 2411 course, we used to use this Dolphin lab manual that was published by McGraw-Hill that students would pay over $100 for, and they always complained that it was very expensive. The content itself was very heavy, and we didn't actually go through many of the experiments that were in this lab manual, so students often complained about that as well. And because of this, we searched some OER lab manuals out there, but it did not quite align with the curriculum with our lecture course. And additionally, the pivot to using course-embedded undergraduate research experiences to enhance research experience for undergraduate students, particularly students at our college that favor employment opportunities over unpaid research opportunities. Embedding cures into our curriculum was very important for student success. And so these three reasons were really guided us in creating an OER lab manual for this lab. So the OER lab manual can be accessed through this QR code or through this website. It is open access, licensed CC BY, so anyone can actually use it if they want to peruse it and use it and apply for their courses. So very briefly, for the use of this newly created OER lab manual, we gave the students both a pre-course survey and then a post-course survey. And looking across the demographics overall, there was about a similar number of male and female participants taking our survey, both at the beginning of the course and then at the end. And the demographic, the race and ethnicity demographic, actually matched the overall demographic of our college. Primarily, we have a lot of underrepresented minorities in our courses. Many of our students are also either sophomores or juniors. And just to note that these surveys were taken in the fall 2023 and the spring 2024 semester. We also asked the students questions about how they perceive their own learning ability based on their overall demographics. And the good news is that our students do not feel that their backgrounds, their financial status, their race, ethnicity, or gender affects their ability to do well in this course. And they actually felt pretty confident about their own abilities in terms of this course. And this is both before the course, the beginning of the course, and after, at the end of the course. So we then asked the students if they've used a paid lab manual, any kind of lab manual in the past, so it could be physics, chemistry, or biology, what their perception of those paid lab manuals were. And so for the most part, students were split 50-50-ish with regards to the manual being confusing, but overall the response was overall pretty positive in terms of how they felt that the manual impacted their learning. In comparison to our lab manual that we gave to the students during the fall 2023 and the spring 2024 semesters, they also had a similar close to 50-50 split with the confusing factor of the lab manual So this leads us to believe that it was more the content itself, but we would have to look at this further in the future to really figure out what part was confusing from the paid versus an OER lab manual. But the other responses pretty much showed, again, a more positive, geared towards more positive feedback for that lab manual, that they felt they did get something out of the lab manual in terms of their learning. So next we compared the grades. We have 2 lab reports in this lab course. The blue here is using the paid version, the paid lab manual version, and these grades were from fall 2019 across 4 Bio 2 lab sections, so BS 2411 sections. And the orange is from the fall 2023 and spring 2024 semesters. And as you can see, the lab report 1 and lab report 2 are not significantly different in terms of their grades. However, I would like to note that the standard deviation here, those outliers are a little bit tighter for the OER version, and the average is actually slightly higher in comparison to the paid lab manual, which suggests to us that the OER lab manual that we produced was just as good as the paid version in providing the students the information that they needed to generate these lab reports. Same story for lab report 2, however, you can see that there's a few lower scores here, and the average is a little bit lower. And this is actually because the lab report 2 for our OER lab manual includes the cure components. So for this lab report, students actually had to do an exercise physiology project, and they were collecting real data from each other and analyzing that data. And this was something that did not exist in the paid lab manual. So we were pretty happy with the outcome of this, because the students were not only gaining more research and real life research skills, but it didn't greatly impact or negatively impact their grades. Next, we looked at overall grades at the end, the final grade distribution, and there was also no significant difference between the paid version versus the OER version. So this suggests to us that our OER lab manual is pretty good in comparison to the paid version. But what was even more significant was when we examined the DFW rates. So anything under C is considered no good for major students in biological sciences. For the fall 2019, the DFW rate was 32.4%. This is when the students were using the paid manual, versus fall 2023 and spring 2024 using the OER, our OER lab manual. That DFW rate actually dropped. So this suggests to us that in using a clearer lab manual that's very specific to our curriculum, we actually have a better impact on, at the minimum, passing more students in this course. And that's actually very important, especially for our student demographic, where we are really prioritizing getting more of these minority students to continue in these STEM fields. So I would like to acknowledge the Sangeeta, Nischal, and Manya, Mascareno, my collaborators on this work, as well as our lab technicians who were helping me every time we changed the experiments, as well as the SUNY OER Services Grant Fund for providing funding for us to work on this lab manual, as well as other funding that provided some course releases for me to work on these particular results. Thank you.